On the first podcast episode of Fantasy Football for Winners back in the summer, I talked a little bit about my background and how I got to this point of presenting fantasy information in ways that I felt were actionable, and how the build out of the blog, the community, it's about 17,000 followers, stems from, in part, providing information that cannot easily be accessed elsewhere. The root of this, and I didn't talk about this on the first podcast, there's a lot of roots to kind of how this got to this point. But one of the roots was something external. I had a lot of internal kind of foundation to this, which was doing well in national fantasy contests, winning a couple of them, one out of over 60,000 people, another out of over 330,000 people, and realizing, oh, I might be good at this. And if I can figure out why I might be good at this, then maybe I can write a book about it and present it to other people. And that's how Fantasy Football for Winners, the book, came out, and then the blog and so on. But the other root of it was external. And the external was I was looking for good fantasy advice when I started doing regular fantasy football leagues with friends. And about 20 years ago, I was watching a sports news show, and they had a fantasy segment. And the guy on the analyst said, don't start this wide receiver this week. The wide receiver was a good wide receiver, number one wide receiver on their team. And the reason was, in 7 of the previous 8 games, this defense has held this wide receiver to under, and it was like 13 fantasy points or something like that. And I look at it first and think, oh, that's really good information. That's really helpful. Good. If I had that person, I would sit them. And then I thought a few moments later, wait a second, what does that even mean? If you go back 7, 8 games, you're talking about between those two teams, 12 to 14 to 15 years. So this person, well-meaning, very smart, presented information that appeared on its face to be helpful, and in fact was mostly worthless. And in closer inspection, the secondary had changed dramatically in recent years. And so this wide receiver was going up against guys that generally he had never gone up against before. And sure enough, that wide receiver had a fantastic game. And I remember thinking in the lead-in, okay, let's see what that wide receiver does. And then when the wide receiver had a terrific, I think he scored like 20 plus points, I thought, okay, so that was advice that was well-meaning, that seemed to be grounded in some statistical analysis that the person had found or that their intern had found. And they presented it on TV, and hundreds of thousands or a million or whatever people saw it, heard it. Some of them maybe acted on it. And in reality, it was bunk. It was nothing. It was a statistic that had no grounding in what managers are looking for, which is, give me a good probability that this start or this sit is going to work out in my favor. That's what we all want as managers. And ideally, the probability is above 50%. If you have a sit-start question and you have 55% confidence based on statistical analysis that something is going to be the right decision, you go with it, because the odds are you'll be right more often than wrong. Similarly, if you draft a player and there is a 50 plus 1% chance that that player will be a bargain versus a bust, if you can't find a better bargain out there, or you're not confident that you can find one, maybe that's the best one you can take at that point because you have that information. So when I saw that and heard it and realized this was a ridiculous statistic, it kind of got me thinking more, and it took a couple years before I started my first blog after that, the short-lived blog that then gave way to the book and then gave way to the blog I have today. I realized, wait a second, if I'm going to if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to talk about fantasy football, it can't just be opinion. Everyone can give opinions. And it can't be statistics disguised as usefulness, because savvy managers are going to pick up on that right away. And even those of us who don't have the time day to day to track this stuff are going to get burned more often than not by bad advice and then realize, wait a second, why am I even listening to this? And that's the worst thing you can be as an analyst, is turning people away because you are bad at it. Why, in such a crowded industry where so many people want to do this, and I had a brief career where I was a fantasy analyst, a paid fantasy analyst, and realized that, wait a second, I'm much happier having a regular job and doing fantasy football for winners than being a paid fantasy analyst, because if I'm doing my own thing, I can actually create my own data analytics. I can actually look at things the way I want to look at them, not the way a boss who might not be as particular about the kind of data that I draw from would be. Derrick Henry is a good example. When I became a professional fantasy analyst for a couple of years, when I started that process, I was all in on Derrick Henry having a major injury and or regressing based on statistical analytics showing that 400 plus touch running backs had a high likelihood of regressing or getting hurt the next year. And I got pushback at my employer for recommending that. They thought it was ridiculous. I insisted, I said, I'm putting my job on the line to say, this is the likelihood. There's a 90+% chance. This is what I'm going with. And it turned out to be right. Now, if it had been wrong, then it would have been the 10% wrong. But it was right because I was confident in the data. I was willing to put my career on the line to say, this is not a ridiculous idea. This is a grounded idea. And sometimes analysts present ridiculous ideas as grounded. The ridiculous idea being, this defense has stopped this wide receiver 7 of the last 8 games. Sounds grounded. It is actually ridiculous. It has no bearing on what's going to happen in the next game because the secondary has changed so much during those 8 games. But if you have a ridiculous idea, seemingly ridiculous, that is actually grounded in reality, grounded in facts, grounded in things that you can show your spreadsheet, show your data, and say, this is how I got to this point, that's legitimacy. That is, I know that there's going to be a plus 50% chance because. And that is what this podcast is all about. That's what the blog is all about. And all these years later, I can now, for example, and this is one of about 1,000 things that I can say with utmost confidence, that this is just a random example I pulled when I pressed record, that the average rookie year fantasy ranking for an undrafted free agent running back is better since 1997 than a 7th round rookie running back. That essentially, if you take 2 running backs, one is an undrafted free agent and another is a 7th round pick, the odds are that the one who is an undrafted free agent is going to have a better season. That is grounded in facts, almost 30 years of data of every single running back who's ever been a rookie in the NFL since 1997. I've got about 1,000 of those, maybe more, of those little nuggets. And all those nuggets together present a bigger picture of what I think can make people smarter fantasy managers. I told people for years that I want to change the game. I want to change the industry. And you can't change the industry by being loudest, in my opinion, although for some people that works briefly. You can't change the industry by being the most clever, because sometimes being too clever can bite you in the butt. That if you're trying to, say, oh, I've got this hot take, this guy's going to be awful, and then you're right, but you had no grounding for why you believe that, you might get some credit, but can you keep it going? Can you sustain it? The blog that I started in 2013, Fantasy Football for Winners, has been going strong now. This is the 13th season of doing it. And a bunch of the people who comment have been commenting since 2015 or earlier. I've gotten to know these people more or less by their name, by their personalities of how they write, how they communicate for a decade or more. And there's a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds, who for 5+ years I've been communicating with. It's been wonderful. This podcast was an attempt to do it slightly differently. Instead of the engagement back and forth, it was more one-sided. I have heard from many of you, and thank you for that, regarding the podcast. Some of you have given reviews. I appreciate it. Some of you have just messaged me. A few of you who've been reading my stuff for a long time, reached out to say, thank goodness you're doing this, because I've been waiting to get more content, essentially, which was very nice. And I say that with all humility. But I really do appreciate that. I work really hard to try to get those 1,000+ data points updated every year, and actionable. And the stuff that isn't actionable, I toss out. If it's a 52% chance, I'm not interested. I'm looking for the stuff that is surefire. This is what I've found. I'm going to bet my money on it. I'm going to draft based on this. I'm going to sit start based on this. And if I can do that, if I can insist that I'm going off of that because I am, that's the confidence I'm trying to give readers and listeners that they can do the same. We're all in this together. We're all fighting our own battles in fantasy football. We're all trying to win in our respective leagues with our own decisions. But if we can all have a common thread of really grounded, actionable intelligence, that's what changes the industry. I'm BJ Rudell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog. Email me anytime. This is the last episode of the season. We'll see you in about 6 months. Take care.